Good morning, students. Today we are going to start the next topic of our first chapter, the Cold War era, which is the emergence of two power blocks. Let's start. The two superpowers were keen on expanding their sphere of influence in the different parts of the world. As we know that the whole world was divided into two superpower blocks. The first one, which was led by USSR, and the second one, which was led by USA. These two power blocks trying to spread their ideology, their philosophy all over the world. And one of the best way for this was making more and more allies. You can also say that this one was a different form of colonization. In a world sharply divided between the two alliance systems, a state was supposed to remain tied to its protective superpower to limit the influence of the other superpower and its allies. So when the world was divided into two power blocks, the smaller nations were joining one of them to protect themselves from the other blocks from whom they did not use or like. They were supposed to remain tied just because they want to limit the influence of the other superpowers. Okay. The smaller states in the allies used the link to the superpower for their own purpose. They got protection, weapons, economic aids against their local rivals, mostly regional neighbors, with whom they had rivalries. Okay, so one question, why the smaller state wanted to join the superpowers? So the main reason behind it, their own purpose, their own benefits. What they would get if they will become a member or if they become a part of the power block. So they got the promise of protection, they got weapons, means military support, they got economic support, they got new technologies. Okay, and after getting all this, they used it against their local or the regional rivals. Okay, if you take an example, Pakistan. So Pakistan joined the USA group just because he wanted to defeat India. After getting all these things from USA, Pakistan started promoting terrorism against India. And USA used his land against his enemies. Okay. So the alliance system led by the two superpowers therefore threatened to divide the entire world into two camps. This division happened first in Europe. Most countries of the Western Europe sided with the US and those of the Eastern Europe joined the Soviet camp. That is why these were also called the Western and the Eastern Alliance. So the two superpower bloc is starting making their own allies, and the whole world was divided into the two different power camps. And this division happened first in Europe. If you look at the map, there are the yellowish part represent the nation who were in the side of USA, and the reddish part of the map represented that these nations are in the side of USSR. That's why the yellowish part was called the Western Alliance and the reddish part is called the Eastern Alliance, because these are the eastern part of the Europe and these all are the western part of the Europe. Good morning, students. When we look at this map, there are three different colors used to represent three different worlds. The first one, the yellowish color, is used to represent the first world, means a group of nations who followed the ideology of USA, liberal democracy and capitalism. The second world, which is represented by the red color, and they follow the ideology of USSR, means socialism and communism. The third world, which is represented by the green color, they follow a different path. They follow the policy of non-aligned movement. Okay, so let's start. The Western Alliance was formalized into an organization which was called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, which came into existence in April 1949. It was an association of 12 states which declared that armed attack on any one of them in Europe or North America would be regarded as an attack on all of them. Each of these states would be obliged to help the other. So the main motive of the NATO was to create a wall of protection for the member of the first world. The maximum nations of NATO will belong to Northern America. The main motive of NATO was we are all one. No one can break us. If someone collides with us, we will all respond together. Okay. Since its founding members were 12, but it increased after the admission of the new member state. The number of the NATO nations were increased up to 30. And the most recent member state to be added to NATO was North Macedonia on 22nd March 2020. On the other hand, to respond to it or to counter it, the eastern part created Warsaw Pact, which was led by the Soviet Union. It was created in 1955 and its main principal function was to counter NATO's forces in Europe. They don't tolerate the NATO organization in the European nation. For countering all the NATO's members, they create a new pact was called Warsaw Pact. It is like if the western part are making something, then why don't we? So the international alliance during the Cold War era were determined by the requirements of the superpower and the calculation of the smaller states. So the formation of a global alliance during the Cold War, it was totally dependent on that what are the necessity of the superpower and can small countries satisfy those needs. Okay, so making alliance with the other nation, it is totally dependent on this thing. As noted above, Europe became the main arena of conflict between the superpower. So, what was the reason why Europe became the main arena of conflict between the superpowers? So, there are three or four different points related to this one. Why Europe became the main battlefield of the Cold War. So, the first one, Soviet Russia, USSR. Russia is in those times was the stronghold of the Marxist-Leninist regime of the communist ideology. There was only one party called the Communist Party, which was ruled by one dictator. And the name of the dictator was Stalin. Many countries in Europe and also regions of the then USSR, which are independent countries today, supported the Cold War in order to get rid of the communist regime. Okay, so this one is important. And breathe the fresh air of democracy. So they want to become democrats. Okay. However, there were also many countries like Eastern Germany, Poland, Hungary, etc., who supported the communist ideology and stood with Soviet Russia as the Eastern Bloc. So, some of the part of the Eastern Bloc, they stand with the USSR, and some of them under the communist regime, they want to get rid of from the communist government. They want breathe the fresh air of the democracy. It means they want democratic government. The next one, France, Italy, West Germany, UK. Sorry, there is a mistake. UK, having just witnessed the disaster of the World War II and the Nazis regime, Europe was all against another communist regime of the USSR influencing their lives. Hence, they formed the Western Bloc, also called the capitalist bloc. That also had the support of the American and NATO countries. Okay, so this one is the second reason why the European nation was divided into two power blocs. United States of America. After World War II, America had emerged as the world superpower. Okay, after dropping the two atom bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, America had emerged as the world superpower. America's primary intention to jump into the Cold War just because he want to prevent Russia from competing for that position. Which position? So the position of the superpower. Okay, so these are some reasons why Europe became the main battlefield of the Cold War. In some cases, the superpower used their military power to bring countries into their respective alliance. So, in some time, the superpower also used their military forces. Let's see an example how the Soviet Union deployed its large army in the Eastern Europe. In the eastern part, the Soviet Union deployed the large army. The Soviet Union used its influence in the Eastern Europe, backed by the large presence of its armies in the countries of the region, to ensure that the eastern half of the Europe remained within its sphere of influence. So, in this, we can see how the Soviet Union deployed its large army in the Eastern Europe to ensure that no one tried to oppose it and remained in its influence. They adopted the policy of Sam Dam and then the Bhed. Okay, all the things. They applied all these things. In the East and Southeast Asia and in West Asia, Middle East, the United States built an alliance system called the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, SEATO, and the Central Treaty Organization, CENTO, CENTO. So look at this map. This one is the map which was under the Southeastern Asia Treaty Organization, SEATO. Okay, so now in this map we observe how USA trying to influence the rest part of the world. Okay. And in this, the Gulf nations, some of the Gulf nations also include in CENTO. Okay, so USA full try to control or to make their allies in the eastern part of the world also. The Soviet Union and Communist China respond by having close relations with regional countries such as North Vietnam, North Korea and Iraq. Okay. And the Soviet Union, since these all nations having the same ideology, the communism. Okay, so that's why the Soviet Union and the Communist China, they create some close relationship with the regional countries like North Korea, Vietnam, and Iraq. The Cold War threatened to divide the world into two alliances. Under these circumstances, many of the newly independent countries, after gaining their independence from the colonial powers such as Britain and France, were worried that they would lose their freedom as soon as they gained formal independence. Okay, so some of the newly made nations, they were worried about it. Okay, recently they got independence, and if they join any of the group, then definitely they will trying to change their international politics, international affairs. Okay, so they were worried that they would lose their freedom as soon as they gained formal independence. Cracks and splits within the alliance were quick to appear. Okay, it was not that the alliance that were made were very good. Very soon there seemed to be clashes between them. Communist China quarreled with the USSR toward the late 1950s, and in 1969 they fought a brief war over a territorial dispute. We see how in this we see how China and the Soviet Union fought against each other on the territorial dispute, despite both of them being the member of the same ideology. They fight with each other. So very quickly cracks and split was appeared. The other important movement was the non-aligned movement, which gave the newly independent countries a way of staying out of this alliance. And India was one of the leading members of the NAM movement, along with Yugoslavia, Egypt, all this. So they start forming a new movement, which was called NAM, non-aligned movement, and it gives a newly independent countries a new way, okay, to stay out from the alliance. It means the member of the NAM, they were not in the side of USA or USSR. You may ask why the superpower needed any allies at all. After all, with their nuclear weapons and regular armies, they were so powerful that the combined power of most of the smaller states in Asia and Africa and even in Europe was no match to that of the superpowers. So, as we knew that the two superpower blocs, means USA or USSR, they were so powerful that none other could match them. But still they wanted to unite a small nation in themselves. Why? What was the reason behind it? Basically, in return of a lot of things, whatever given by the superpowers, they wanted something from the small nation also. Superpower were not giving anything for free. There was some political reason somewhere behind their generosity. So, what was the reason behind it? Yet the smaller states were helpful for the superpower in gaining access to the first one, vital resources such as oil and minerals. The second one, territory from where the superpower could launch their weapons and troops, as we have seen in the case of Cuban Missile Crisis, since the Cuba was an ally of USSR. So USSR used his land against USA. USSR deployed some missiles in Cuba against USA. Location from where they could spy on each other. And economic support in that many small allies together could help pay for military expense. So these are some reasons. Okay. There were also important for ideological reasons. The loyalty of the allies suggested that the superpower were winning the war of ideas as well. The liberal democracy and capitalism were better than socialism and communism, or vice versa. The ideological reason is also important. It means if the number of member states in any particular group, if they were increased, then definitely it symbolizes that our policy is much better than the other one. That's why they all are joining us. Okay. So ideological reason is also important. You may ask why the